This movie begins with Mrs. Claudia Morgenstein having a moment of contemplation. As she types on a typewriter, typical of the settings of old, her daughters watch on. She reaches into a drawer and pulls out a weapon. Without blinking, she uses it on her daughter still watching. Years later, Millie, Claudia's daughter, is getting married to Gerald. As guests have fun, Millie beckons on Kate, her sister, to come over. She introduces Kate to Peter, Gerald's cousin who has just moved over. After the handshake and a brief exchange of pleasantries, Kate hurriedly leaves the scene. She seems not to be interested in making acquaintances with Peter, even though Peter follows her around. Joanna, Gerald's mom, walks up to the couple and reminds Gerald to fix the TV as soon as possible. Millie wasn't expecting such a request, not when the wedding is still on, and they should be heading for their honeymoon after. Millie tries to stamp her feet, suggesting the TV waits. Gerald would prefer to massage Joanna's ego. With a smile on his face, he assures his mom that the TV will be fixed in no time. The wedding continues. Millie's dad has a brief chat with Thalia, his wife, who notes Joanna's influence over Gerald. They both wish Millie luck, hoping Millie and Joanna avoid being at loggerheads. Millie gathers the girls and throws her bouquet. Amusingly, it is Peter who catches it. He then hands it over to his new friend Kate. Later that day, Gerald answers his mom's call to fix the TV. Millie just sits there, waiting for Gerald to be done. Nothing except her honeymoon will interest her. Away from Millie and her mother-in-law, Kate and the others are cleaning the house. Their maid Ruby chats to Kate about Peter. Peter had earlier stated his intention to become a soldier, an idea Kate detests, even though her dad was a soldier. Kate doesn't want Peter to join the army. When Peter persists, Kate warns that she will sever ties with him. Peter just wants to list for a tour before heading to college. Kate isn't joking either. Being the daughter of a soldier wasn't easy, so she abhors the idea. Besides, she doesn't think it makes sense to join the army in the heat of war. Much later, during the high school graduation party, the man talking preaches about the pros and cons of war. He admonishes the class of '67 to draw strength and wisdom from his sermon. Kate's and Peter's family are there for them. They congratulate them at the end of the sermon before Kate runs off. Back at Millie's room, Kate talks about her issues with Peter. Peter insists on serving in the army, so Kate complains bitterly. Millie tells Kate that it is pertinent that Peter serve. Only that way can he get good-paying jobs. As the two ladies chat, Gerald's call comes in through the landline for Millie. Gerald and Millie are having dinner at a restaurant. They both have news for each other. Gerald goes first and mentions that he is enlisted in the army. Getting a better job has been the hardest thing for a while. Millie doesn't know how to react. It's Millie's turn. She mistakenly says out loud that she's pregnant, to the hearing of other guests. At Mr. Morgenstein's home, the Morgenstein's daughters are having dinner with their dad, Thalia, Gerald, and Peter. Gerald talks about enlisting in the army. As much as Millie dislikes it, she still thinks that Gerald should have talked to her about it first, knowing how she feels about the idea. Gerald then asks Peter if he has let the cat out of the bag. Peter has enlisted too. This breaks Kate's heart. She storms outside. Peter follows her and explains that he had no option. He says the risk of not enlisting for at least a tour isn't something he'll want to experience. Ruby tries to calm Kate down, but Kate walks away. She acts like she cares no more for Peter. Gerald and Millie are packing his bags and trying to make light of the situation. Millie pauses for a while and becomes sad. Gerald hugs her from behind and promises that all will be well. There are many things bothering Millie. What if he doesn't return? How does she cope with Joanna? Coincidentally, Joanna enters the house and calls out to Gerald to come help her with her bags. At the Morgensteins' home, Kate spends some time with Peter. Peter promises to come back in one piece. Kate is unresponsive as Peter leaves to go spend time with his family. The next day, the train is ready to leave with the enlisted soldiers. Everyone who has a loved one leaving is sad. Millie and Joanna wish Gerald didn't have to go. Even Kate thinks so. She is sad as the train leaves. Back at home, Joanna and Millie continue their routine, arguing over minute things. At Morgenstein's home, Kate laments to Ruby. She's contemplating totally ditching relationships with men. She thinks that men make decisions that stress women. Well, Ruby will wait for her Prince Charming to find her. She even goes to church to pray about it. As Ruby leaves the church, she times her step wrongly and falls, spraining her ankle. Reggie, the new church janitor, finds her and helps her. He also helps take her home while they talk and make acquaintances. Joanna is almost miserable knowing that her son is far away, fighting the war. The news from the radio that talks about lives being lost in the war irks her. For the first time in her life, Gerald isn't by her side. She wishes that her precious Gerald would come back to her. Joanna sits to have some cookies. Millie calmly confronts her that the cookies are meant for Gerald, but Joanna laughs over it. She will eat anything in her. Besides, Gerald deserves better cookies than whatever Millie has prepared. This is the height of disrespect for Millie. She won't take further disrespect from Joanna, so she decides to go back to her parents' house. Soon, she and her son Tommy are at her dad's house. They are welcomed by Ruby and Thalia, who saw this coming. Kate has found a group of friends that she aligns with. Celeste, who leads the group of hippies, would lead them to sing songs of peace, to sing songs that soothe their mind and soul. Kate returns from meeting with her friends and finds a surprise. She now has roommates, Millie and Tommy. It's the next service day. As members exit the church building, Reggie meets up with Ruby. Their friendship is beginning to take shape. It is now customary for them to walk each other home after church services. Subsequently, Gerald doesn't fail to send letters to his beloved wife. In return, Millie sends him cakes and cookies. In one of the meetings with the hippies, Van finishes singing and then introduces himself to Kate. Kate is open to making friends with Van. Van, who has a car, offers to drop her off, and she agrees. After the drop-off, Millie wants to know who Kate's new friend is, but Kate, as always, says very few words while marching inside. Millie informs her that Peter sent a letter for her, but she seems uninterested. Another day, Van comes to pick Kate up. The hippies head over to the memorial meeting of fallen soldiers that Thalia and Millie have also attended. The hippies disrupt the meeting by protesting the mandatory draft of men to the war. Thalia and Millie go back home with the report. Mr. Morgenstein thinks they should cut Kate some slack. He thinks she'll learn to do better eventually. Millie also thinks that Peter's absence gets to Kate. Reggie doesn't waste an opportunity to say nice things to Ruby, while Ruby would smile at Reggie's endearment. Millie is still sleeping when Gerald calls to know how she and Tommy are faring. She's excited to hear from him. They can't wait to see each other again. Gerald then promises to be home as soon as he can before dropping the call. Later that evening, Reggie and Ruby have just finished seeing a movie. Reggie opens up to Ruby on how he feels about her. Sadly, he has been drafted into the army and will be leaving soon. He thinks it's best he takes his relationship with Ruby much further. As Ruby wonders what becomes of them when Reggie leaves, Reggie goes on one knee and proposes to her. With a broad smile on her face, she accepts. Shortly after the proposal, Reggie and Ruby are walking down the aisle excitedly. The next day, Millie advises Kate about going out with his new group of hippies. Millie knows she's only doing that to get her mind off Peter. Van drives down, and Kate goes out with him. Van has a thing against those involved in the war. At the eatery, Van accosts a soldier. He mentions his dislike for what they do and spits on him. Kate tries to stop him, but Van won't budge. She ends up making apologies on Van's behalf. Weeks have passed, and Gerald hasn't called Millie. It's quite normal for soldiers not to call after crossing the equator. This saddens everyone who has a love interest in the war. A lady even mentions that someone has returned from the war without an arm. Months later, Millie's baby bump has grown big. She's playing with her kid when the phone rings. Finally, Gerald. After many months. Gerald mentions the dark side of the war. He also mentions that he's been assigned to the ship's engine room. This puts him away from the center of the war. He begs Millie to keep her faith up as she awaits his return. The women are playing a game when they hear a knock at the door. Ruby goes to answer it, and she's handed a letter from the government. Reggie has been declared missing in action. Ruby bursts out crying. Her husband of only a few weeks can't have possibly passed on. Ruby's ordeal brings back sad memories for the Morgenstein girls. Their mom endured so many heartaches for all the time their dad was at war. They even conclude that their mom took her to put her mind at rest, as she couldn't go on and on with the uncertainty. Millie throws a baby shower, and everyone is present, including Joanna, who even has a gift for her. While they chat and make merry, Kate goes in and finds her dad unresponsive. She calls for help, and the room is filled in seconds. Mr. Morgenstein is fine. He's just shocked to hear the sad news that the ship housing the soldiers caught fire. Sadly, Gerald happens to be on the ship. Joanna is tense. She then accuses Millie of being a bad wife. She says it's the reason Gerald enlisted into the army, to get away from her. Millie is a bit comforted by Gerald's revelation that he now works in the engine room. Kate now sees reasons to be empathetic towards Peter. She finally decides to read all of Peter's letters. She finds that she loves Peter and then hopes for the best. The next day, Millie walks in on Ruby writing a letter to Reggie. Ruby is confident of Reggie's return. When Millie asks, Ruby confirms her trust in God with regards to Reggie's situation. Kate is back from town. She hasn't heard from Peter. Sadly, no one has heard from him. She worries but calms herself with her new friends. The next day, a nurse from the government comes with news. Gerald has been badly burnt in the fire. The nurse promises that Gerald will reach out to her soon enough. Apparently, the fire started from the engine. Weeks later, a few senior soldiers come knocking at the door. They inform Millie that Gerald has passed on from severe burn wounds. They hand over Gerald's personal effects and leave. The times become hard for Millie. The one thing she feared has befallen her. Ruby then becomes a support system for her. Gerald's burial has been fixed. It is an emotional time for everyone in the family. The event makes Joanna and Millie throw away their differences. Gerald's passing now becomes a turning point in their lives, a unifying one. Peter returns from the war with a bandaged head. Kate is thankful for his return. Their reunion reignites the love they have for each other. Another union that receives a boost is that of Ruby and Reggie. Reggie was found deep in the woods and brought back to town. This is a true life story of certain individuals whose future and joy hang on the success of the war. For some, it's a sad and lonely end. For others, their pain is overturned by the return of their loved ones.